It's time for Horse Talk Live, a full hour dedicated to the associations, products, and events going on within the horse world.
Howdy, horse lovers. Thanks for coming to join us for Horse Talk Live on Rural TV. As always, I'm your host, Lizzie Iverson, and our show today is focused on making sure that our equine companions are taken care of with their good quality forage. We're going to find out more about what it means to a horse in respects to forage with Standlee Hay Company. So next to me, I have Dr. Tania Cubitt, and she's going to be explaining the nutritional side of things, why this is so important to our horses, making sure that they stay healthy. And then we have a great representative from Standlee Hay Company, and we have Dusty Standlee, who's the president of Standlee Hay Company out of Idaho. We're going to be talking about what makes good hay from the West, and I can appreciate this coming from Montana. Dusty told me just a minute ago that he's about 6 hours away from where I live, and there's a difference when you're talking about hay from the West, hay from the East, hay from the North, and hay from the South. So we're going to find out what it means to us and our horses on today's program. We want to remind everybody that if you have missed some of our episodes, you can check us out at myruraltv.com to catch up with all of the past Horse Talk Live episodes. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest, Dr. Cubitt. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks so much for having us, Lizzie.
And so tell us what you do as your job. You're an equine nutritionist. What does that really mean?
Well, what that means is a lot of school, really. And I'll just preface, I have a bit of a funny accent because I'm originally from Australia.
Yes, I figured you're not from Idaho.
Exactly, I am not from Idaho. I currently live in Virginia, but I did an undergraduate degree in Australia, and I moved over here and did a master's and PhD in equine nutrition in Virginia. And now I work for an independent nutrition consulting company, and we work all around the world, and I absolutely love it.
Sure.
And we have started working with Standlee Hay out of Idaho, and we're just helping them out with new products, formulation, teaching some of their sales staff, keeping them up to date on the latest and greatest of what's happening in equine nutrition.
Have you always been a horse lover?
I have. My mom had horses, my grandparents had horses, so it's definitely in my blood.
Okay, so this actually means something to you.
Certainly does.
All right. Well, Dusty Standlee, tell us some history on how you got started in this business and who actually started the business.
Well, my father started it, so it's kind of in my blood now. Sure. I guess you grow up on a farm, so you're always kind of a farmer. But he started in the early '80s, and we started out doing some thoroughbred business. Wanted to offer good forage for horses on the East Coast mostly, and we from there we've been in the retail industry. We ship hay worldwide to horses everywhere.
Okay, which is, I told you earlier today, like when I think about buying hay, for the most part, it's like, who do I know in my area? But there can be some advantages to going to the same source, even if it's out of state, even if it's cross country. A lot of people do that and choose it when they choose Standlee Hay Company. And there's a lot of benefits to knowing where your hay comes from and the consistency. And that's what Dr. Cubitt's going to help us understand, how a horse actually functions in their anatomy and what it means to have this good quality forage. So tell us, first of all, Dusty, though, what makes Idaho so good for hay?
Well, we can turn the water on and off when we need to. Everything's irrigated.
Okay.
We're in the high desert, so we only get 7 or 8 inches of rain a year.
Okay.
So we're at an advantage to be able to control our climate a little more so than some other areas in the country.
Is this like the most ideal spot in the United States? Can anybody else have
I would say Idaho grows the best hay there is.
Okay. Well, obviously. And so what kind of hay are you growing to, year in and year out?
So we grow alfalfa, we grow Timothy grass, orchard grass, and then through these products here on the table, we can mix them in different mixes to offer different types of feed.
And so every year, the biggest problem that farmers face is the weather and wondering, what it's going to hold, be it too much rain or not enough rain, cold, hot, and you guys really are able to just kind of figure that it's going to be good the whole time? the whole
Yeah,
summer?
I don't think we don't stress out whenever there's a rain cloud in there, but
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's much easier than where they get more rainfall.
Okay. And so when did this all get started? When did Standlee Hay Company become a company?
1982 it was incorporated.
Okay. And how many acres did you start out with, and what do you have now?
We started out just putting hay up for some farmers in the area.
Okay.
And then we started out with a small 200-acre farm in the early 90s. Today we harvest about 23,000 acres worth of hay.
Dang.
Every summer.
Okay. Well, obviously you're doing something right, and we're going to find out the importance of what you guys are doing and how much attention you pay. I wish that our audience could smell how good the studio smells right now because of the products that we have in here. It's all very beautiful, and we're going to find out what each of these products are and how they can benefit our horses. So Dr. Cubitt, tell us, about the horse. They're different than a lot of animals, and nutrition is extremely important, especially because we've changed the way that a horse naturally eats.
Nutrition is, obviously I'm biased, one of the most important aspects to managing horses. Obviously there are other areas, but nutrition is so important. And every time I give seminars and I talk to people, and it's primarily what I do is a lot of teaching, I always start out with the evolution of the horse. And sometimes people roll their eyes and say, oh, that's such common sense, but it's really amazing how far we have deviated away from what's common and natural to the horse to how we manage them today. If you think about the horse, I ask people, who would agree with me that the horse is a grazing animal? And everybody puts their hands up and says, yes, the horse is designed to graze and constantly nibble on forage all day long. And yet how we manage them today is so much different from that. We have to keep them in stalls. Not everybody has the luxury of, beautiful large pastures with lots of grass. So we manage them in small stalls. We have to meal feed them. Another little trick that I always ask people is there are no buckets hanging on the trees in the wild. Horses eat off the ground, and I think that's also another really important aspect of horse management is not only feeding them more natural ingredients to their digestive tract, but also how you're feeding them. So if you think about the horse, when he's eating, his neck is extended down and he's chewing off the ground, and his neck is fully extended. So there's a lot more room for the forage or the whatever it is, the concentrate, to be swallowed versus if the bucket is at chest height. So I much prefer to feed them off the ground. But, yeah, so there are just some things about the horse is really a grazing animal. So the forage, bar none, is the most important part of the horse's diet.
Well, I think a lot of times that as horse owners, we get caught up in all these products that are thrown at us, and supplemental products. But it really does come back to the basics here.
It certainly does.
And that is forage.
And I always like to keep it extremely simple. I go into feed rooms and, like you say, they're extremely complicated. There's 1,001 different supplements and so many different choices of concentrate for them to choose from. So then I go on to talk about, okay, well, inside the horse's digestive tract is still the same as it was centuries ago when it was still out grazing. So while what we do with horses has changed and how we manage them and how we feed them, internally they're still the same. To talk about the teeth are really the first part of the digestive tract. And making sure your horse's teeth are floated regularly is absolutely important. But then we go on to the stomach. And we've actually got a picture that I brought along of the stomach. And you can see in the top portion of this diagram the non-glandular region, and the bottom portion is the glandular region. And if I was able to allow your viewers to touch the bottom section of the stomach there, it's covered in a mucus coating. And that's really important because horses in the wild would have been constantly chewing on forage or grass and different types of shrubs. And there are tiny little cells down in that green area, that glandular region, that produce acid. And unlike in dogs or cats that produce acid as a meal response, so they see food and they produce acid, horses constantly produce acid because in the wild they were constantly nibbling on grass. So they never developed that meal response. So then when we take them out of that natural environment where they're constantly grazing and we put them in a stall, where they have limited, meal feedings, morning, afternoon.
What's convenient for
exactly. And horses is a really expensive discipline. It's not cheap, so we all have to work in order to afford the good quality forage and hay. So they have to fit into our schedule, literally. And
unfortunately
so if they're lucky, they get fed 3 times a day or twice a day. But what happens then is the acid builds up and builds up in the stomach. And that mucus coating down there is to protect that tissue from the acid. Well, if we leave him in the stall all day and he doesn't have anything to eat, the acid builds up. Maybe he starts chewing the wood in your stall if you're not lucky. And then when you take him out to ride him, when you come home from work, then as he exercises, the stomach stretches. That acid splashes up onto that top portion that is not protected. And you can see there was a little line, a very distinct line between the two sections of the stomach. And right above that is where we get a lot of gastric stomach ulcers. One of the simplest things that you can do to avoid stomach ulcers is to add alfalfa to the diet. I've actually done a lot of research that shows feeding alfalfa, because it's high in calcium, is a natural antacid. So it's like a Tums for your horse. Buffers the stomach acid. So, if you've got a performance horse and you think maybe he has some ulcers or he's a little sensitive, you can feed him some alfalfa. Trailering horses, super stressful thing to do with horses. So if you feed hay in the trailer, you could have alfalfa. Or just prior to exercise, giving some alfalfa. It doesn't have to be hay. It could be pellets or cubes. And oftentimes I recommend to people pellets or cubes because it's just so much more convenient than pulling out a big bale of hay.
Okay, and that's exactly where Standlee Hay Company comes into play. This this way to incorporate what you want in your horse's diet.
Absolutely.
And have full control over it. Thank goodness, because there are so many changes. There are so many different recommendations for different horses and what they're doing. But we want to remind everybody that this forage is the basis of it all.
Absolutely. It is the basis of the diet, and then we build on that. So we find out what we have as hay and pasture, and then we build the diet with a bag of concentrate or a supplement, and the only role of adding extra concentrate or supplement is to balance out the diet to complement what you are or are not getting out of the hay and pasture. But absolutely, the forage is the foundation and should always be.
So when you say concentrate, what does that exactly mean?
When I talk about concentrate, I talk about our bags of grain. Most people would use the word grain. So your high-fat, high-fiber type feed or your vitamin mineral supplement, that's the bag of concentrate.
Okay.
Concentrated nutrients.
Okay, but that's just a supplement.
It really is, and that confuses people because we all think of supplement as a bucket that you feed 1 or 2 ounces of, but really we feed that concentrate really just to supplement what we're not getting out of the hay. Okay. And depending on the area of the country or where you get the hay, as to the quality, as to how much you have to supplement. On the East Coast, we typically have to feed a lot more concentrate than on the West Coast because we don't always have the best quality of hay, access to the best quality hay.
All right. Well, we're just getting started here on Horse Talk Live, learning about Standlee Hay Company, what they have to offer for everybody from coast to coast. They're great products, forage products for our horses. We're going to take a short break, but we'll be back with more after this. Thanks, everybody, for coming back to Horse Talk Live on Rural TV. I'm Lizzie Iwerson. Some of our past episodes of Horse Talk Live will be available to everybody at home at myruraltv.com. Today, our show is focused around Standlee Hay Company and how they are providing services to horse owners around the country with their beautiful hay products, their forage products. They come in 3 different forms. We have cube form, pellet formed, and hay bales, which we're all familiar with. We're going to be learning more about what that means to all of our horse owners and how they can get access to all of this great forage. Dr. Tania Cubitt is here with us today, and she's giving us a little insight about how a horse's digestive tract works and why this forage is so important to them and their overall health. So we talked about their stomach. Their whole digestive tract is just a little bit more complicated.
It certainly
and
is.
Sensitive than a lot of animals.
It is. And, after the stomach, we go to the small intestine. And you can see from the diagram that we brought along, the small intestine is like a big, long garden hose. And there are enzymes here that break down things like sugars and starches. There are no bacteria here per se. But then we go into the large intestine, and you can see that in the bottom right-hand side of the diagram. Think about that like the fermentation vat. It's a huge, big, full of bacteria. And it's very, very easy for these bacteria to get out of balance, let's say.
Okay.
Some of the first thing, their primary goal in life is to digest fiber. So we keep saying that fiber is the most important part of the horse's diet. Well, if you look at the digestive tract, it makes sense why. That is the largest part of the digestive tract. So a couple of things that you will notice in your horse if those bacteria get out of whack, let's say, because we have two types of bacteria. Bacteria that make acid and bacteria that utilize acid.
Okay.
These ones that make acid, so they're breaking down fiber, they're breaking down the food, they're producing acids. These other bacteria are going to utilize that acid. Well, if we get not a lot of forage in the diet, or we get large amounts of sugars and starches, and we overload the digestive tract with these sugars and starches, then these bacteria that make acid, they go crazy. And these other ones can't keep up. So then we have this acidic, potentially toxic environment because these other ones die back. First things you'll notice in your horse, potentially if those bacteria are unhappy, more gas than is normal for your horse. And you know what's normal for your horse.
Right.
Gas is normal, more than normal. Loose manure, starting to get to diarrhea, and that can lead to dehydration. And obviously if the food is passing quickly through the digestive tract, it's not being utilized properly. Gas colic can actually occur if they get too much gas, and it'll build up in their intestine and then it might twist around, so that's an issue. It can become very acidic and eventually lead to laminitis. So it goes bad fairly quickly if we upset those bacteria.
Extremely serious.
Very
situation.
serious, exactly. And definitely want to avoid all those issues. And so one of the best ways of avoiding those issues and making sure your horse has plenty of forage.
As simple as that.
Things like this time of year, the weather has changed. We've gone out of the summer and it's definitely into the fall now. The weather's cooled down. If you have grass available to your horse, it's dried off. So, usually in the summertime, the horse gets a lot of moisture from the forage. Well, they're not now. Maybe they're drinking a little less because it's cooler. We're not exercising them as much. So one of the big issues this time of year is actually impaction colic. Because their digestive tract is all drying out. They're getting less moisture in their diet. So if you feed a forage product like a pellet, a grass pellet, or an alfalfa cube or something, adding water to it will help get some more moisture into the horse's digestive tract. Just feeding them hay will actually encourage them to drink water as well.
Okay, so just getting them to continue ingesting anything that will...
Ingesting fiber will encourage the horse to drink water and stay hydrated and perform at its best.
So ideally, would you recommend, we see on the screen here some cubes and pellets that we do add water to, and it's very palatable to a horse?
It's very palatable. I mean, horses are picky. So on one day, you might find a horse that loves it when you add water to the beet pulp or the pellets or the cubes, and then the next day you find another horse that can't stand it. So everyone that's had a horse knows that some horses can be really picky. So it's a case by case. But definitely adding water to the pellets. I find sometimes the alfalfa cubes can be a little hard, so adding water to them is perfect. Helps get a bit of more moisture into the digestive tract, especially this time of year.
And being alfalfa, it's very palatable for a horse then, right?
Most horses really love the flavor of alfalfa. It's highly digestible. It's very good quality protein sources. It's higher in calories. So it's excellent for horses that are working a lot and need to maintain weight, or brood mares, lactating brood mares, perhaps that have a really high nutrient requirement, young growing horses. It's a really excellent additive to add alfalfa as part of the forage.
So how would a person know? Are there tests that you can do on your hay? How do you know when you need a product, a supplemental product, like something that Standlee Hay offers? If your hay just isn't the best it can be, if you're getting it from your local, guy down the road who gives it to you every week or every month, how do you know if it's just not quite enough?
You can actually, there is a forage testing laboratory in New York. It's called Equa Analytical, and you can send some forage in a little Ziploc bag away to them and pay a small amount of money. I think it's about $35 and get an analysis done. You can go online to their website, and it's pretty easy to get the instructions on how to do that. And then contact someone like myself, and they can help you read that forage report, because that's where the hard part comes. It can be a little confusing when you get a piece of paper back with all these numbers. So you can certainly ask your veterinarian or your nutritionist to decipher that for you. But ultimately, a lot of horse owners make nutritional decisions, feeding changes, based on what the horse looks like.
Okay.
Whether he's lost weight or gained weight is a huge one. That's a real easy one for us to see. Hair coat, and then performance as well. Maybe I have a barrel racing horse and he's not going fast enough, or I have a hunter jumper and he's going too fast. So we want to make feeding changes that way. Ultimately, with the bagged forage products, and especially your alfalfa pellets or cubes, I like to feed those to your heavily exercising horses, any horse that needs a lot of extra calories and nutrients for its level of performance or physical state, like it's a brood mare or a pregnant mare or a lactating mare, where they have higher requirements.
So do you just go by what your horse looks like? Is there a typical amount of calories that a horse should receive every day that you
There are, yes. The Nutrient Requirements Council, it's a group that put together a book called the National Research, it's the NRC.
Okay.
And that has requirements for horses for each type of, activity level. We maintenance, light, medium, heavy exercise, and we break it down by body weight, and it will outline, based on thousands and thousands of research projects around the world. We've outlined in that energy requirements, protein, zinc, copper, your trace minerals, vitamins and minerals, that kind of thing. So we've outlined those nutrients and the requirements for horses. Your average horse owner certainly doesn't need to study that guide and know exactly my horse needs 1.5% of this and that. A lot of times with good quality forage and following the feeding directions on the back of your bag of concentrate and you buy the right bag for your horse. So if you have a fat pony that really doesn't do a lot in the paddock, you don't want to buy him the high-performing athlete feed, but you certainly can't feed the required amount. But a lot of times, good quality hay can supplement most of the nutrients we need. Certainly with that pony, good hay and pasture will supply all of the energy and probably all of the protein.
What does quality mean to you?
Good quality, well, I always start out with bad quality. And bad quality across the board is always the same. Mold, dirt, dust, contaminants, weeds, things that shouldn't be in the hay. That's always bad quality hay. And then good quality hay, obviously it doesn't have any of those contaminants in there. But it then comes to what's appropriate for my horse. So with my little fat pony who, is seen a lot of miles but is irreplaceable, then maybe the most leafy, nutritious alfalfa wouldn't be the best for him because it's just got too many calories for him. And then we go maybe the Timothy or a grass hay would be more ideal for him. Okay.
So, Dusty, what have you guys been able to do? How have you been able to maintain this good quality that Dr. Cubitt has explained to us, and make sure that what people get is what they want?
Well, for us, it's all started in the field. When we can control quality from the very beginning, we take it in the field. Those guys take great pride in what they're doing out there, and from there we protect it. Everything's stored under sheds or under tarps, and then it's ran through the plant, through the processes. There's many quality control pieces inside the plant also. Before it goes to the bag, and then we also control a lot of the transportation. We have 4 distribution centers on the East Coast, so we have our hands on it all the way through the process, and that's what's made us succeed in controlling quality.
Okay, and starting off with, you mentioned that you know, a lot of your customers were in the East Coast, people that didn't have access to such great hay. Do you find that that is your biggest seller now, is the East Coast still?
Not necessarily. You know, we're in every state across the nation, so you know, people can get our products pretty well anywhere.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a few weak areas, but
okay. So you produce the hay, you get it up off the ground, and then you have dealers that are helping folks from in all 50 states purchase the product.
Yep, they're across the nation.
Okay, and I know that on the Standlee website that everybody at home can find a dealer locator. If you're interested in being a consumer, then you can find out where the closest dealer is to you. We're going to take a short break, but continue our discussion about Standlee Hay Company and the importance of recognizing good quality forage when it comes to you and your horse. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to Horse Talk Live. I'm Lizzie Iwerson, and Standlee Hay Company is our special guest today. They've traveled from Idaho to be with us and talk about what their company has to offer to us horse owners from coast to coast. We also have an equine nutritionist who's here explaining how important forage is to a horse, and it really is the building blocks. This is something that we cannot overlook. We have so many options when it comes to grain and supplements and everything else, but the most important thing that us horse owners focus on is that forage.
Yeah, it should be. The forage is absolutely the most important part of the horse's diet, and if we come away with nothing else from today, it's the forage is the most important part.
So typically, or I mean ideally, a horse could live on forage if it was the best quality and had all the nutrition components.
Yeah, if we could make a hay, I mean, ultimately one of the drawbacks to hay is a lot of times we can't get all of the trace minerals and vitamins that maybe the horse needs at high levels of exercise. So for a maintenance horse that's not doing anything, just standing in the field, then some pasture and hay, some good quality hay will definitely provide all of the calories and the protein they need. Some research I did showed even through stages of growth in the young thoroughbred or brood mares that we can supply most of the calories and protein they need. But then depending on the soil that the hay was grown in as to the level of deficiency maybe of those trace minerals and vitamins. So then just a generic like ration balance or a low intake vitamin mineral pellet for that maintenance horse just to complement some of those deficiencies in minerals. But then if the horse is doing a lot of extra exercise, say a race horse, then we would need to feed more of that concentrate that we were talking about because they just need more calories. But absolutely, still the foundation, even in the racehorse, is forage. When I design diets, if we think about the diet as 100%, I would never want the horse to be getting less than 50% of their nutrients coming from forage. So 50-50 would be the bare, the minimum that I would go to. Usually we would prefer to see 70% forage, 30% concentrate, or even higher amount of forage. Because even in the race horses or horses that are heavily exercising, when they're living in training facilities and they don't really get a lot of access to pasture and it's really, really stressful, a lot of times giving them a meal at lunchtime of some forage pellets. A lot of times in those situations, the pellets or the cubes are more convenient and consistency is higher within those bags. Bag to bag, you're guaranteed the same product, the same consistency and the same nutrients. And they don't waste it as much. You know, when there's a lot of activity in these facilities and you don't want the horse turning in circles, ripping the hay apart, and then using it as the bathroom. You would much prefer that they're consuming all the products. So the pellets and the cubes can certainly be more convenient and consistent in those situations.
Well, we know, I mean, most horse owners are aware of that consistency factor and the sensitivity that our horses' stomachs,
Absolutely.
So tell us exactly why consistency is so important.
Well, one of the first rules we learn when we get a horse and we start to learn about nutrition is that we don't make any rapid changes in the diet. Everything has to be gradual, and it's all to do with that bacteria in the hindgut. So we need to make sure that whether we're adding a concentrate or changing the type of concentrate or even adding a better quality forage or changing the type of hay, that we do this gradually, because otherwise we're going to get diarrhea, more gas, all those kind of issues in the hindgut and less digestion of that forage. So everything we want to be done to change gradually. But that also is really important when you buy a product, bag to bag, when you think you're buying the same product, that you absolutely are buying the same product, and consistency is there. And so when you're working with good quality companies that have good quality standards, then bag to bag, you know you're getting the same product. So in the feed industry, we use the term fixed formulas when we talk about concentrates. So that means that the ingredients that we put in there every week from batch to batch are identical. So always the guaranteed analysis that you get, the energy, protein, that all stays the same, but the ingredients that go into the product that make up that guaranteed analysis, they also need to stay the same. And so with Standlee Hay, that's one of their key is to have good quality and consistency. So from bag to bag, you as the horse owner know you're getting the same product so that you're not going to cause any unwanted digestive issues.
So Desi, do you think that having the location of Standlee Hay is conducive to the consistency of your product?
Absolutely. We, it's high elevation desert in southern Idaho, so it's very important. I mean, we can just control our climate. It's a perfect place to put up hay.
Would the climate have a lot of effect on the final product then?
It would. We can dry our hay. We cut it. It lays out in open fields for 5 or 6 days and naturally dries. It's all sun cured. So, as you know, a lot of areas are concerned with rain when hay's laying out in the field.
Yeah.
We're concerned because it does happen. It's not perfect, but for the most part, we get good, green, fresh smelling products just like what's in front of us.
All right. Well, let's talk about the products that we have. And we'll start with the cubes. This is how would you describe a cube? Is it just compressed?
Yeah, it basically goes through it's basically compressed. It goes through a dye process similar to the pellets. So they're just squeezed through a square hole or round. Okay,
but the initial product, what you find in a cube is the same that you would find in a square bale then?
Definitely with Standlee Hay, the hay that they use, the excellent quality hay that you could buy in, say, the bale that's behind us, in a compressed bale, then it's the same product that is chopped up and then put into a cube.
So what we're seeing here, we saw some of those bales. It's all the same.
You can see there in the picture the small bales in the back.
Okay.
And those small bales, sometimes people get a little concerned. Oh, it's such a small bale. Am I getting my money's worth? Because everything's expensive. But people need to pick one of those up and realize on a weight basis, it's really compressed, but you're still getting certainly your money's worth. They're heavy bales. And it being really compressed like that, it's actually really convenient. Not all of us have massive facilities to store and put up all of this hay. So if we've got a small little hay room, those little small bales are really convenient. And then that's another convenience to the cubes and the pellets is they're in bags, they don't get dusty, they're easy to store, and you're feeding them in a bucket, so they're not wasting any of it.
So how do you know if you need to add water or just feed them as is?
I usually recommend, just because I like to get more water into the horse's diet anyway, that if the horse will eat it with the water on it, put water on it. Put water on anything. It really isn't going to hurt. The cubes more so because they can be a little hard. I like in some horses because they're a little bigger.
Yeah.
They seem to be a little more palatable if you wet them. And the other benefit is, see, when it comes to the digestive tract, whether it's long stem forage, i.e. in a bale of hay, or whether it's a cube where the fiber length is shorter, or a pellet where it's even shorter, the digestive tract really doesn't mind, whether it's long, medium, or short. Mentally, though, if we feed horses 100% a pelleted or cubed product, they will eat it really quickly, and then they'll get cranky, and they'll be kicking on the door and kicking on the wall and getting cranky. So wetting the product also slows them down.
Okay. So Dusty, tell us what products Standlee Hay has to offer.
All right, so the three main forms would be cubes, pellets, and then our baled hay, which you see behind us. The cubes are offered in 100% alfalfa,
okay,
Timothy alfalfa mix, oat alfalfa, or straight Timothy grass cube. The pellets are offered in alfalfa, Timothy, Timothy, and orchard grass. And then we have our baled products, which we have a straight alfalfa and then a mixed hay, which would be orchard alfalfa, maybe a few other grasses in it, and then also a straight Timothy forage.
So a great variety. How does somebody know exactly what to, say there's a brand new horse owner, how do they know where to go? Like if they wanted to choose Standlee Hay Company, how do they know which of the products to choose? Which kind of hay suits their horse the best?
That's where it comes down to, okay, what type of horse do you have? And this is where feeding horses is so much more difficult than feeding other true livestock animals like cows or pigs, because we feed them all the same and we expect the same result, whether it's more meat or milk or whatever. In horses, they're all different. They're all genetically different, and every one of us wants a different thing from our horse, whether it's he looks pretty in the field, or he doesn't buck me off, or he wins a gold medal for me. So that's where it comes down to, what are you doing with your horse? And then within what am I doing within the breed, I have an easy keeper, which maybe they're not actually the easiest to keep, because we can't, you know, my mom always used to say they live on the smell of an oily rag. They look at food and they get fat. So then what do we feed them? So if I had a horse, a lot of our maintenance horses are doing light exercise, they're maybe easy keepers. So they maintain their weight well. They don't need a lot of extra calories. Maybe more of your Timothy or your grass type product, grass pellet or grass cube. But then if you have horses that are harder to keep weight on, whether it's a performance horse or a pregnant mare or stallions during the breeding season, then go towards more of an alfalfa type product because it has more calories per pound.
Okay. So a lot of people kind of, when they think alfalfa, they think it's going to give their horse too much energy. Is that true, or is that a misconception?
Alfalfa certainly does have more calories than most grass hay. So, yeah, if your horse doesn't need the extra calories and you're not riding him enough, then he doesn't need the extra alfalfa. But as far as some people have the myth that it's the excess protein in the alfalfa or something like that, and it's really not. Protein isn't going to make your horse crazy or hot, as some people say. It's really the excess calories that may elicit a more hyper behavior in some of these horses that are sensitive and don't really need the extra calories.
Sure.
So it just depends on the horse you have.
Okay. Now, if somebody wanted to contact or get some advice, can they contact Standlee Hay Company for advice on what and how much to feed their horse?
Absolutely. Yeah, they can, you know, I would suggest visiting our website also. We have a lot of information on our website at standleehay.com.
Okay, and the different kinds of forage that you prepare.
Yep, they can see each mix and match and bells and cubes and pellets on it. So.
Okay. All right, well, it's time for a quick break, but we've got lots more to cover when it comes to feeding your horse and keeping him healthy, so stick around because we'll be right back. Welcome back to Horse Talk Live on Rural TV. I'm Lizzie Iverson. We're talking to Standlee Hay Company today. We have a special equine nutritionist who's here to shed some light on how to keep our horses healthy and the most important parts to keeping them healthy, which is forage. Thanks to Standlee Hay Company, folks have access to great quality, consistent forage, no matter which state you live in. We hear all the time about drought or too much rain, you know, these different variables that affect our hay. And Dr. Cubitt has been able to tell us how important that consistency is and how sensitive our horses' intestinal tracts are. So keeping true to what you start with, continuing that for your horse, but Also altering it should they need more or less. And so that's where some of these bagged products that Standlee Hay has comes into play, because you can kind of tailor your whole feeding program, right?
You certainly can, yeah. And, you know, I've talked about forage being so important, but I really haven't touched on how much does my horse need.
Right.
And our general rules that we use in equine nutrition are based on body weight. Okay. So let's use the average horse, and because I just want to do easy math, let's go with 1,000 pounds. Let's say for a 1,000-pound average horse, he needs at least 1.5% of his body weight, so that would be 15 pounds. So a bare minimum for any horse would be 1% of their body weight. That would be the absolute bare minimum of forage.
Okay.
Now that's really, really low if you're cutting them on a diet or something like that. The more general recommendation is 1.5 to 2% of their body weight. So if you have a draft horse, that's a lot of hay.
Yes, it is.
So for that 1,000-pound animal, we're looking at 15 to 20 pounds of forage that the horse needs to consume. Now, if you're lucky and you have access to plenty of grass in your fields, then that's going to go towards that amount of forage that your horse is consuming.
Yeah.
But in the winter time, or if you have horses that are managed in smaller facilities and you can't really rely on the forage, then the pasture in the field, they're 100% reliant on you for their forage requirements. So that 15 pounds has to come 100% from you.
Okay.
Now, whether it's coming from baled hay or a cube or a pellet, a pound is a pound is a pound. A pellet, 15 pounds of pellets, is going to take up a lot less volume than 15 pounds of hay.
Right.
So again, the horses will eat it quicker. So I don't usually recommend 100% pelleted or cubed diet.
Okay.
Not that it's going to really affect the digestive tract, but we mentioned earlier they will go crazy.
Yeah.
But there are some instances, say your geriatric or senior horse who has no teeth and can't consume that long stem forage because he's got no teeth, then we need to use a pelleted type product that we can wet like we saw earlier. It really breaks down and it's much, much easier for them to consume. But say if you have not the best hay, but it's all you can afford, it's all you have available to you in your area, but you want to either extend the life of that hay over the winter time, say, because you only had a certain amount of it, or you know it's not the best quality, so you want to improve the quality, that's where adding, so we've got the 15 pounds, we're going to do 10 pounds of the long stem hay that we know isn't the best, but we're going to add 5 pounds of a cube or a pellet on top of it. So we're still getting our 15 pounds of forage, but we're just alternating the source that it's coming from.
Well, I just think it's like the smartest idea, to use what you have, and then if you need to add something to it, then you have these bags that are easy to travel with.
They are. Traveling, convenience, they're ideal for people traveling.
Yeah, I would imagine people that are on a circuit, like going from state to state, you can't take all your hay with you. You have to, at some point, buy some. But this, is going to be the one consistent factor.
It's a whole lot easier to have some 50-pound bags of pellets in the back of the trailer than some massive bales of hay.
Yeah.
Same with the bale behind us. That's 50 pounds behind us, and we go to shows or as we're training consumers, they walk up and can't believe it's 50 pounds until they go to lift the bell, and it's wow, that really is 50 pounds.
Well, I want to know how all of this becomes the finished product. You have to have a huge operation back in Idaho and a lot of folks helping to put up this hay. So walk us through this whole farming scenario back in Idaho.
Well, farming takes a lot of hours, especially in the hay business. Everything we do is at night. But a lot of this wouldn't be possible without great employees. We have about 300 employees in the summertime, and they make this a lot of fun, and they make it possible because everyone has a lot of pride and cares a lot about what products we put out in the marketplace.
So on the screen here, we see the team in action. What's a typical day like for your employees? Are they all day in the field? What's it like?
Yeah, so we'll usually get going as far as the swathers you see here. They'll start early in the morning, and and work, 12, 14-hour days. And then from there, the night crew comes in, which is rakes and balers, and these guys will start. We have to wait for dew or moisture in there at night because it's so dry in the day. So in order to stick the leaves on the hay, we actually do most of these processes at night, just so we can get all that leaf retention and it's not quite so stemmy. And
so over the years since your dad first got into the business, have you guys just kind of continued to educate yourselves on how to maintain this great quality?
Yeah, we have. We learn something new every year. But yeah, we have. We started growing Timothy in the late 90s. That was a pretty big learning experience. And of course, trying to, coordinate the team of people that do this and what all goes on, it's challenging every year. Weather and everything changes every year, so there's nothing consistent about it.
Right, I can imagine. And is each type of hay, we've talked about alfalfa and Timothy and orchard grass, does each of those require a different technique on growing them, as far as like amount of water and irrigation and things like that?
It does, yeah. Alfalfa will cut 3 to 4 times a year. All of the fertilizer and water is different than what the grasses would be. Most of the grasses are cut 2 times a year. So all the fertilizer there is much different. The tillage, even the quality control, you got to learn about 2 different types of hay and train the teams about, what needs to go into the different products and why they do look different, but what's good and bad.
Okay. So, obviously we think of summertime as putting up hay and everything. What goes on at the Standlee Hay Company during the winter and off months?
Well, the off season, in the summer we put up all this hay and it's all in sheds or trapped up in tarps.
Okay.
Protected away from the weather. So we do have some seasonal help, and then from there it's all this hay's got to be shipped and sold and used somewhere. So a lot of those resources go into the winter, preparing for the next year or helping process these products for this winter. And that's another thing that makes us successful is we can supply hay year round.
Okay.
A lot of people don't have hay year round for their consumers, and we take a lot of pride in making sure that we can service our customers all year round.
In this past year, with the droughts and everything like in Texas that we saw last year, were you shipping out a bunch more hay? Did you run out last year versus other years? Or?
Yeah, hay sales have been strong just because of the drought, and people need forage, but we're trying to really build a name in forage, take care of our current customers, and teach people how important forage is. It's not just hay that you go pick up somewhere.
Right.
We're really taking pride in what we're making here.
All right. Well, it's a family business. I know that our viewers really appreciate that sort of thing going on in our community, especially having a product that we can rely on, and not only for just peace of mind, but for our horse's health. So, Dr. Cubitt, as we wrap up today's show, we have a few more minutes to discuss some main points that we talked about today. And first and foremost is the quality of hay that we provide with our horses. And ideally, we want to have a good quality hay.
Absolutely.
So what do we want to look for when we choose our hay?
When we choose hay, obviously, we're looking for the type of horse we have. So we know the horse we have, and we know if it needs a higher calories or higher nutrients. But ultimately, you want to first go in and just rule out bad quality.
Okay.
That it has those contaminants in there. And I just wanted to touch on one other thing. You mentioned to Dusty about with the drought and had hay sales gone up. With the drought and, the economy and how everything's been going, I'll constantly get the same question. How can I feed my horses cheaper?
Okay.
And the one thing I always say to that is if you feed them properly, if you give them plenty of water,
okay,
good quality hay, and you feed a good concentrate if they need it, then you will avoid a lot of other issues that may come along with trying to cut corners, like vet bills, etc., and having to buy, you know, numerous buckets of supplements that cost a lot of money to try and complement you cutting corners on buying a cheaper hay. So ultimately, try not to cut corners. Feed good hay, plenty of water, and you will cut a lot of costs inevitably.
You bet. That's a great point, because those vet bills, if you own a horse, then surely you know that any trip to the vet is not typically good.
It's never
for the
cheap. It's never
pocketbook.
cheap.
So just finding this good hay, and Standlee Hay Company is a company that we can all trust, and no matter what state you're in, if you find that dealer that provides Standlee Hay Company, then you know that your horse is going to be taken care of, and you don't have to worry about those problems that can...
No, you're getting consistency. Every bag, every bale. Because they grow so much, they have such a huge facility, they can provide so much of the same quality hay.
Okay. Year in and year out. Well, to the two of you, we tip our hats. We appreciate anybody in this industry that's taking care to make sure that we are able to take care of our horses in the best ways possible. So, Dr. Tania, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you again for having us.
Yeah. And Dusty, thanks for representing the West so well.
You got it. Thanks for having us.
We appreciate it. Everybody at home, I know that everybody's benefited from today's show, because we're getting to the root of what our horse needs, and that is forage, good quality forage, and Standlee Hay Company is providing that for everybody. So hope everybody at home is sure to make sure they're feeding their horses the best. And we want to remind you, if you want to catch up with us on the web, you can visit myruraltv.com for past Horse Talk Live episodes, as well as a full Rural TV programming schedule. We appreciate everybody tuning in for Horse Talk Live. Until next time, go get your horse some good hay, and we'll see you around the barn.